the humiliation. I still remember the day as if it were yesterday. The day everything changed, though I didn't know it yet. The office smelled of polished wood, expensive cologne, and the kind of corporate arrogance that suffocates. I had been working at Lexford Solutions for over 3 years. Late nights, early mornings, endless reports, and projects no one noticed. My pay barely covered my rent, let alone the rent of ambition I carried in my chest. That morning, I had prepared a presentation I hoped would finally impress the CEO, Martin Carrington. The project was innovative, a potential pivot that could bring the company out of months of declining profits. I had poured every ounce of my creativity into it, staying up nights analyzing data, sketching out graphs, designing slides, rehearsing every word. I entered the boardroom, heart pounding, laptop in hand, expecting a moment that could change my career. Instead, I was met with laughter. Here comes Malik, Martin said, smirking as he looked at my worn-out shoes and the frayed sleeves of my jacket. Let me guess, another amateur attempt at genius? I froze, trying to swallow the lump in my throat. I think this project could... Stop right there, he interrupted. His tone carried the kind of condescension you only hear from people who have never truly struggled. You know, Malik, I've been patient, but I can't have someone in this company who is clearly too poor to understand real business. The room went silent. My stomach sank. Too poor. I whispered, feeling the words burn like acid. Yes, he said, leaning back in his chair, smiling. Too poor to think like a winner. Too poor to handle responsibility. I can't have a failure on my team. Pack your things. Every muscle in my body tensed. My blood burned with humiliation. My colleagues averted their eyes. Some tried to hide smirks. I walked out of the boardroom, laptop in hand, the weight of the word poor pressing down on me like lead. Poor, meaningless, disposable. That evening, I wandered the streets, unsure where to go. I didn't have a home to return to, just a small apartment, bills stacking up like cruel reminders that life wasn't on my side. I passed the company building, looking up at the glass facade. Inside, Martin and his executives were likely congratulating themselves for their brilliance, oblivious to the fire they had sparked. I sat down on a bench, head in my hands, and whispered to myself, one day, they'll see. One day, they'll regret this. The first step of my plan didn't come immediately. First, I had to survive. I started freelancing, consulting small startups for pennies, barely enough to keep a roof over my head. Nights were long, but they gave me something I hadn't realized I'd lost. Freedom. Freedom to think, to create, to rebuild without someone calling me inferior. I began networking quietly, reaching out to friends I had helped in the past, mentors who had quietly believed in me. I wasn't ready to take on the corporate world again. Not yet, but I was ready to build something they couldn't touch. Weeks passed. One rainy evening, as I was leaving a client's office, I overheard two people talking about Lexford Solutions. The company was hemorrhaging clients. Key projects were failing. Investors were panicking. And Martin Carrington was growing desperate. It struck me like a bolt of lightning. He had fired me because he thought I was insignificant, but now his empire was crumbling, and I held the knowledge, the skill, and the ability that could save it. I felt a surge of power, but not just for revenge. For the first time, I realized I could rewrite the story, not by begging, not by pleading, but by proving my worth. That night, I sat at my apartment desk, sketching ideas and financial strategies. I pored over Lexford's public filings, their client contracts, and market data. I discovered opportunities they had ignored, mistakes they had made, vulnerabilities in the company that no one else had the courage or vision to address. And then it clicked. I could save them, not because they deserved it, but because I had the ability to do so. And in doing so, I would finally show Martin Carrington and everyone else the value he had been too blind to see. But I knew one thing. I couldn't just walk back into that office. Not yet. I had to plan, strategize, move quietly until the moment was perfect. And so, in the quiet of my tiny apartment, surrounded by notebooks, spreadsheets, and the hum of the city outside, I began plotting the next chapter. A chapter where the poor, the underestimated, the dismissed would rise, where the man Martin Carrington had called too poor would become indispensable. I didn't know exactly how it happened yet, but I knew one thing for certain. The next time I walked into that office, nothing would be the same, because power isn't given. It's taken. And Martin Carrington, the man who fired me with a smile, was about to learn that lesson the hard way. The plan. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was scared, but because my mind refused to rest. It raced through every detail of Lexford Solutions, every weak point, every mismanaged account, every executive too arrogant to notice they were steering the ship toward disaster. I needed a plan, not a reckless one, not one born of anger or revenge. A precise, surgical strategy that would allow me to save the company while remaining invisible, a ghost in the machine, correcting the course while the people who had fired me were oblivious. The first step was research. I rented a small office in a co-working space downtown, a nondescript room with a single desk and a whiteboard. It became my command center. I pored over Lexford's financial statements. I cross-referenced client accounts with contracts, examining every number, every margin, every decision. Patterns emerged, recurring mistakes, ignored market trends, gaps in strategy that no one had the patience or intellect to notice. And then I reached out, not to old colleagues. They would report me instantly, but to freelancers, consultants, and industry experts who owed me favors. One by one, I recruited a network of allies, programmers, analysts, and marketing strategists, people who respected talent over title, people who were just as hungry as I was. We formed a quiet underground team. We called ourselves Project Phoenix, a name that spoke to rebirth, resilience, and the fire that rises from ashes. By week 2, Project Phoenix was in full swing. We began building models to restructure Lexford's failing accounts. I designed strategies to recover lost clients, streamline operations, and optimize the company's failing marketing campaigns. All of it had to be done remotely. I had no access to Lexford's internal systems anymore. So we simulated scenarios using publicly available data and the intelligence gathered by our network. It was painstaking work. Hours turned into days, and my small apartment became a war room. Notebooks scattered across the floor, whiteboards covered with flowcharts, my laptop constantly buzzing with messages and updates. Elijah, my friend and confidant, kept asking if I was overreaching. "Malik, you've never even been officially back in the company," he said. "What if they find out you're behind all this?" I shook my head. That's exactly why we remain invisible. We're the solution they'll never expect. Weeks passed. One night, I was reviewing client acquisition reports when a name caught my eye. Carrington Enterprises, Martin's own personal investment vehicle. The company had lost a key client because the account manager mishandled a proposal. A simple misstep, but it cost him hundreds of thousands. I saw the opportunity. Using our remote network, we launched a targeted solution. Outreach emails, strategic proposals, and optimized client strategies, all under the guise of anonymous consultants. Within days, the lost client responded. They were impressed with the professionalism, the insight, and the innovative solutions. By the end of the week, not only had the account been recovered, but Lexford was on track to secure additional contracts that had once seemed out of reach. And Martin? He had no idea who was behind it. Project Phoenix worked like clockwork. We identified operational inefficiencies, restructured project teams, and even implemented a cost-saving system for vendor contracts, all executed remotely under aliases and communicated through secure channels. Every successful intervention strengthened my belief I could save this company without ever stepping inside its doors. Then came the boldest move. Lexford's board of directors was panicking. The CEO had begun a desperate search for solutions, calling in every consultant and executive he trusted, none of whom could deliver. I seized the opportunity to infiltrate their network subtly, using the limited access I retained from old contacts and indirect communication channels. We executed a comprehensive recovery strategy, targeted campaigns, operational restructuring, and client retention initiatives, all under the radar. By the end of the month, Lexford Solutions showed signs of recovery that no one, not even Martin, could explain. Stock stabilized. Clients returned. Key contracts that were on the brink of collapse were salvaged. Rumors began to circulate among employees about a mysterious savior team operating behind the scenes. Some speculated it was an external consulting firm. Others believed it was an internal initiative they hadn't been briefed on. And then the unexpected happened. Martin called an emergency board meeting. "I don't know who's behind these improvements," he said, his voice tight. "But someone saved this company. We need to find out who." The irony wasn't lost on me. The man who fired me for being too poor had no idea that the very person capable of saving him had been working quietly outside his notice, orchestrating his company's revival from nothing. Elijah grinned as I read the news online. "They're panicking," he said. "You've got them exactly where you want them." I nodded. "Patience. They'll meet me soon enough." Over the next weeks, Lexford's performance continued to improve. Clients raved about their new efficiency, unaware it was powered by me. Internal teams noticed better workflow, reduced costs, and increased revenue. Yet Martin took all the credit. And that was perfect, because the moment he believed he was indispensable, the moment he relaxed into his hubris, my move would come. I started preparing for the final step, the reveal. It had to be dramatic. It had to leave no doubt who was behind the miracle that had saved his company. And most importantly, it had to teach Martin Carrington a lesson he would never forget. But there was one complication. I received an anonymous tip. Someone had noticed irregularities in the project execution. Martin's inner circle had begun to suspect external interference. If they traced it back, Project Phoenix would be exposed prematurely. I realized that timing would be everything. Too soon, and they could dismantle my plan. Too late, and they could take all the credit again. So I waited, patiently, strategically, calculating every move, every contingency. And then the email came, marked urgent. It was from Martin's executive assistant. "Mr. Malik, your expertise is urgently needed. The CEO requests your immediate input on the next quarter strategy. He claims it's an emergency." I stared at it. He wanted me back. Unwittingly, he was summoning the very person he had cast aside. I smiled. The final act was about to begin. The email sat in my inbox like a trap wrapped in opportunity. "Mr. Malik, your expertise is urgently needed. The CEO requests your immediate input on the next quarter strategy. He claims it's an emergency." I read it 3 times, savoring the irony. Martin Carrington, the man who had humiliated me, underestimated me, and thrown me out like I was nothing, was now begging for my insight. He didn't know it yet, but calling me back was the first step in a lesson he would never forget. I walked into Lexford Solutions the next morning, dressed sharply but quietly, every detail planned. The lobby was sleek, as if nothing had changed, but I could feel the tension in the air. Employees whispered as I passed, some wide-eyed, others smirking, but all curious. I reached the executive floor and was shown to Martin's office. He looked up from his desk, flustered, blinking as if he hadn't expected to see me standing there. "Malik," he said, trying to sound composed. You came." I smiled faintly. "You asked for me." His jaw tightened. Yes, we need your insight. The company, it's facing a critical juncture, and your experience could be valuable." I nodded, taking a seat across from him. "I'll help," I said slowly, "but on one condition, complete transparency. No hiding facts. No manipulation. Everything on the table." He swallowed, nodded, agreed. The next hours were intense. I led strategy meetings with the board under the guise of consultation, but every suggestion I gave, every projection I showed, was deliberately designed to highlight what had been mishandled before. Revenue forecasts, client retention strategies, cost-cutting initiatives. Everything pointed to one undeniable truth. The company had survived because of the principles I had applied outside their notice. Martin noticed, though he didn't realize the full picture. He kept trying to interject, claiming credit for decisions I subtly guided him toward, but the room could sense the disconnect between his knowledge and the results we were achieving. I remained calm, methodical, my mind orchestrating every reaction, anticipating every misstep. By the afternoon, Lexford's board was astonished. Revenue projections exceeded expectations. Client contracts that had been on the verge of collapse were now thriving. Operational inefficiencies were revealed and resolved with ease. And all of it, stemmed from the work I had done outside their awareness. Then came the subtle, devastating reveal. I asked the board to review detailed reports of the initiatives and who had executed them. I distributed evidence, timelines, emails, encrypted project logs, showing the source of every recovered account, every client retention, every operational improvement. The room froze. Martin's face drained of color. What is this?" he stammered. I leaned forward. "Everything you see here, every success that brought Lexford Solutions back from the brink, was guided, executed, and implemented by a team led by me, Malik Carter. Months ago, when you threw me out, you believed my poverty made me incapable. You were wrong." Gasps filled the room. Board members exchanged shocked glances. Employees whispered, some openly applauding. Martin's voice cracked. You've done all of this while outside the company?" I nodded. "I did it because I believed in the work, not because I believed in you. And now, Lexford owes its recovery to the person you humiliated, dismissed, and underestimated." Silence followed. The weight of revelation pressed down on Martin. He looked around the boardroom, attempting to salvage authority, but it was gone. Gone, replaced by the undeniable proof that he relied on someone he considered inferior. "You saved this company," he finally whispered, voice tight with disbelief. I smiled. "Yes, but I didn't do it for you. I did it to prove that being called too poor does not define your worth, and it certainly doesn't define your ability to change the world." The board erupted in discussion, praise, and astonishment. Investors began calling for immediate meetings. Clients reached out, wanting confirmation of the turnaround. And Martin? He sank into his chair, realizing that for the first time, he had no leverage, no superiority, no argument. But I wasn't done. I laid out my terms. Public acknowledgement of my team's contributions. Full transparency in all ongoing projects. Personal apology from Martin Carrington. A leadership position for me in guiding the next phase of Lexford's revival, but only on my terms, with autonomy. Martin hesitated. "These terms are extreme." I shook my head. "They're fair. You took from me. Now you return the credit. Or Lexford will have to face the consequences of continuing without me." The board nodded, visibly impressed by my composure and the evidence presented. Martin had no choice. He swallowed hard. "Fine. Your terms agreed." That night, I walked out of the office victorious. But the satisfaction was tempered by something else, an awareness that power and influence were never permanent. Lexford Solutions had been saved, yes, but in the shadows, opportunities and threats loomed, waiting for the next moment of vulnerability. As I stepped into the city streets, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Impressive work today, but your fight is only beginning. There are bigger challenges ahead. Are you ready?" I smiled, feeling the fire reignite in my chest. I didn't reply. Not yet. I didn't need to. The city around me buzzed with endless possibility. Because one thing was certain, I had been underestimated once. I would never allow that again. And for Martin Carrington, the man who fired me for being too poor, this was only the beginning of understanding who he had truly crossed. The legacy. The city lights glimmered like 1,000 promises as I stepped out of the Lexford building that night. The air was crisp, carrying the faint hum of traffic and distant sirens. I felt no fear, only the satisfaction of vindication. Months had passed since I had returned to the company under my terms. Lexford Solutions was no longer teetering on the edge of collapse. Clients praised the newfound transparency and efficiency. Internal operations, once chaotic, now ran like a well-oiled machine. And Martin Carrington? He had issued a formal, public apology, humbly acknowledging my contributions, my strategy, and the brilliance he had once failed to recognize. Yet, despite the public redemption of my role, my mind never lingered on the past. My focus was on the future. The first step in building that future was the creation of the Carter Initiative, an internal division I established within Lexford. Its mission was simple: to identify overlooked talent, nurture potential, and turn undervalued employees into the innovators they were capable of becoming. I handpicked a team of brilliant but ignored individuals, many of whom had been dismissed, underpaid, or marginalized by corporate bureaucracy. You have to understand, I told them during our first meeting, I wasn't always in this position. I was once overlooked, underestimated, dismissed. The world called me too poor, too insignificant, too nothing. But none of that matters. Talent, vision, and determination can't be ignored forever. Here, you'll have a chance to prove it. Their eyes sparkled with hope, determination, and a quiet disbelief. I could see that same fire I had felt years ago, the fire that refused to be extinguished by arrogance or ridicule. Martin tried to reclaim some authority, offering suggestions for the initiative. I know the company, he said, and I think I can guide. I cut him off gently, but firmly. Martin, this is about giving overlooked talent a chance. You've had your turn. Now step back. Watch. Learn. He nodded, silently accepting the reality that he no longer led by power or fear, but by circumstance. The Carter Initiative launched quietly at first, identifying high-potential employees across departments, giving them projects with autonomy, mentorship, and resources they'd never received before. Within weeks, innovation surged. Internal reports showed increased productivity, creative solutions to long-standing problems, and a dramatic boost in employee morale. Lexford Solutions had been saved not only by my intervention, but by transforming the culture from the inside out. Where once arrogance and dismissal had ruled, recognition, guidance, and empowerment now defined the environment. The press began to notice. Articles lauded Lexford's sudden rise from near bankruptcy. Headlines read, "The Invisible Savior: How One Man Turned a Company Around." From fire to founder, Malik Carter's secret strategy saves Lexford. The CEO who learned the hard way, lessons in humility and leadership. Even Martin couldn't hide the humility etched into his expression during interviews. He had learned, painfully and publicly, that dismissing someone based on wealth, background, or appearance could be disastrous. But despite the accolades, I knew the most important victories weren't public recognition. They were personal. They were the moments I watched a quiet, overlooked employee propose a brilliant solution, or a young intern gain the confidence to pitch their own project. Moments when potential triumphed over prejudice. And yet, even in victory, a whisper of anticipation lingered. One evening, I was in my office overlooking the skyline, reviewing reports from the Carter Initiative. A notification flashed on my phone, an anonymous message. "Impressive work, Malik. You've rewritten the rules. But not everyone plays fair. Some challenges are bigger than you face yet. Are you ready?" I smiled, leaning back in my chair. The city lights reflected in my eyes like stars, each one a reminder that the world was vast, unpredictable, and full of opportunity. Elijah, sitting across from me, raised an eyebrow. "Another one?" "Not another," I replied calmly. "The real ones." Because I understood something that Martin never would. Triumph isn't final. Success isn't permanent. Every victory is simply the foundation for the next challenge. I tapped a few keys, reviewing our expansion plans. Lexford was thriving, the initiative was flourishing, and yet the world had far bigger tests waiting. Competitors, skeptics, and the unpredictable current of industry all waited, ready to strike. But I was ready. Years of underestimation, humiliation, and adversity had forged something far more resilient than mere skill. They had created vision, strategy, and relentless determination. And as I looked out over the city, the text still glowing on my phone, I whispered to myself, they thought I was nothing. They thought they could bury me. But I've learned something. Nothing can stop the person who refuses to be defeated. And with that, I turned back to the reports, the city humming below me. I had saved a company, reshaped a culture, and proven the world wrong. But the next challenge, bigger, darker, and more consequential than any before, was already approaching. And I would meet it, because Malik Carter had learned the ultimate lesson. Being underestimated is not a weakness. It is the greatest weapon. The Yendi, with a world of possibilities left open for the next chapter.